Hey, good morning, everyone. Pastor Chris here. Hey, I switched positions for my talk. I'm usually over there, but the sun was in my eyes. So what I did is I just came right around the corner, just turned my chair, and here I am. You know, in 1965, there was a song released by the Byrds called Turn, Turn, Turn. It was originally written by Pete Seeger in 1959. It became a big hit for the Byrds in 65. And the song, To Everything Turn, 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 There is a Season, Turn, 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 is taken from the first 8 verses of Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And this has been such a great couple days with the release of the hostages, with the peace deal that's made between Gaza and Israel, the changing dynamic in the Middle East with peace coming. Just fantastic. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu quoted one of these verses. In verse 8, it says, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. So, what we have to remember is that in Israel and Jerusalem, the 3 great big Abrahamic faiths are all represented there. Judaism, which in simplest terms believes in the Old Testament of the Bible, where Ecclesiastes is found, but not the New. Christians believe the New Testament is inspired by God because that fulfills the promised Messiah Jews are waiting for. And Islam, who Abraham is one of the fathers of faith in Islam. 3 great Abrahamic religions all come together. Ecclesiastes was written during the Old Testament times. It was written by, we don't know, Koheleth. It can be translated, Koheleth is seems to be a title. Could be professor, teacher, preacher, leader in the sense of a spiritual philosopher or guide. And what the book of Ecclesiastes is about the best you can get out of life apart from God. It's not an atheistic outlook, but it is more an agnostic outlook on life. It's a look at what life is without God, who is there and exists, is outside of your life. And chapter 3 just looks at what happens in nature, in life, as this world goes on. So what I'm going to do today was to read this, since this was mentioned, and what we see and why it's important to the end of the war in Gaza. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to mend. A time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, and a time for war and a time for peace. So let me stop there at the end of that poem. What Koheleth is saying is look at life. This is what you see, and this is how life progresses. And right now, as we can see from what Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel said, we are in a time of peace, a time of building, soon to be a time of dancing and laughing, a time of healing, and it's all written by Koheleth in Scripture, in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. So, I'm glad that you noticed that. I'm glad this was mentioned. Ecclesiastes is a great book. I used to encourage, oh good gosh, every young person just starting out in life to read this, because there is such wisdom. You know, it's said that Solomon wrote 3 books in Scripture: Proverbs, Song of Solomon, and Ecclesiastes. Some people believe this is Koheleth. And it was interesting to look at the time periods of life when he wrote these. It's said that he wrote Song of Solomon, or Song of Songs, when he was a young man. He saw a girl out there, and she was so... he could barely keep her hands off of her. She was so hot. Proverbs is written when he was middle-aged, as he's achieved his success and is in the prime of reaching that height. And Ecclesiastes was written when he was an old man, looking back at life and all he had, and giving advice to the young people coming after him, the new generation, if you will. And I loved how that, it wasn't me that said this, a pastor that made this observation that I know, but I think it's such a great observation and a great way to read these books. Young, middle-aged, old, Song of Solomon, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. So, young or old, but especially young, let me encourage you to read this book. The teacher, the philosopher, the professor, the preacher, such great words for the new generation. Keep the questions coming. Excellent questions. And it really keeps me in prayer to God to give me the words He wants me to share with you. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart for challenging me. I'm Pastor Chris Ireland. Remember, every Wednesday, Saturday, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, at FL Compass Church, and now on Instagram, at FL Compass Church. Have a great rest of the week. Be blessed. See you Saturday.